In this free Introduction to Shoemaking course, I'm going to talk you through some of the key components that are used throughout the shoemaking process. I'm also going to walk you through some of my favorite shoemaking hand tools, what they're called and what they're used for. And then on to the good stuff, I'm going to show you a step-by-step shoemaking tutorial for this two-tone yellow mid-heel mule. Now, the full tutorial for this mule is within my footwear masterclass, along with tons and tons and tons of other tutorials. But I really just wanted to give you a taste of what I Can Make Shoes is all about so that you can see how easy shoemaking from home really is. But firstly, let me introduce myself. My name's Amanda and I'm the founder of I Can Make Shoes, and I've been teaching my home shoemaking technique for over a decade. Right up from 2010 to 2020, I was teaching in-person workshops from my studio here in London, and from 2020 to current, I've been teaching these techniques online. Now, in the past, I would run a 3-day intensive workshop and you'd only have time to make one pair of shoes. There wouldn't be any time for doing custom fittings, and once the workshop was over, it can be really difficult to remember all the steps. But in my online footwear masterclass program, I have included everything I know about making shoes from home. So not only have I included a whole variety of different shoe and boot tutorials, I've also included loads of tips and tricks for getting the best custom fit for you and how to troubleshoot mistakes if they happen. Myself and my team put a lot of effort into nurturing this community. So at the bottom of every single lesson, you have an opportunity to ask questions. You can upload photos and videos of where you're stuck, and we go ahead and answer those every single day. And the best part of all is that you can read everybody else's questions as well. Some people in our community are just doing this to have fun. Some people have real trouble trying to find shoes that actually fit their feet properly. And some people are even looking to start businesses of their own. One of my favorite student examples at the moment is Jossie Juritz, who designed and made her very first pair of boots with this amazing cat design on the side. She had such an amazing reaction from people online that I actually supported her into going through the process of putting the boot into production, and she's now sold out of her famous cat boot twice.
The I Can Make Shoes online course is the best online course I've ever taken.
Not only do my big feet now have the most beautiful shoes, but I also can't believe that I can make shoes.
Now, the masterclass is designed to be completed over a long period of time, starting off as a complete beginner and working your way up through the lessons and eventually mastering the craft of making shoes from home. With that being said, it can take as little as a week to get yourself up and running and making your own custom fitting shoes. But that's enough from me. Let's dive in and start talking about the components and tools, and I really hope you enjoy the shoemaking lesson. There are a few key components that go into any shoe that you're making, and I thought I would do a quick run through of them now. First and foremost, you need to have your lasts. Your lasts are what are going to determine the size of your shoe, the heel height of your shoe, the toe shape of your shoe. Here's an example of 2 high heel lasts with a very different toe shape. So you can see this one would be used to make a pointed toe shoe and this one to make a round toe shoe. Now, the lasts also come in lots of different heel heights. So as we can see, this one is a high heel pitch. This one is actually a flat shoe pitch. So it's got a little bit of a raise on there, and that's so that we can build up a little bit of a heel tip at the heel area there. Now, you'll also notice on this last that it's been built up with cork, and that's to accommodate a wider fit. So you can actually buy cork in sheets like this so that you can measure your foot and adjust your last to get a custom fit. The next component I want to talk about is our insoles. Now, depending on whether you're making flat shoes or heeled shoes, you can use 2 different types of insoles. For flat shoes, I like something a little bit more flexible, so I would recommend a Texon board, which is a form of cellulose board that has quite a lot of flexibility to it. I usually will cut that to the exact shape of the bottom or the feather edge of my flat last, and that I'll use straight as it is for an insole. Now, if you are making a high heel or a mid heel, you'll need a shanked insole board, which looks something like this. This actually has a metal shank in that arch area, and without it, your arch would completely collapse with your foot in this position. The most important thing here is to make sure that your insole fits the pitch of your last perfectly. You will notice that this insole board is much too big for the last, and we've done that on purpose because it's designed to be trimmed down to size to fit your last perfectly. Now, this component is so important and is often overlooked, but it really acts as the backbone of the whole shoe. That is incredibly sturdy and holding all the body weight. So I would really recommend you get some good quality insoles for your shoemaking projects. Once you've trimmed the insoles down to size, we end up covering them in leather or your material of choice, and that is then ready to build a shoe around. The next component I have on my list is heels. Now, heels come in lots of different shapes and sizes, but I've got a few examples here in front of me just to show you the basics. So the most important thing when selecting your heel is, again, to make sure that they fit with the correct pitch of the last that you're using. And as you can see with these heels, they come with removable heel tips, which get hammered on at the end after you have covered them. Now, before we move on from this section, there is so many different options in terms of heels and other components that you can use when making your shoes. So for example, you can buy platform units which look a little bit like this. You could get a molded footbed, a pre-molded sole, or even a sneaker sole. Now, just to throw a little bit of terminology in the mix, the next component is called your upper. Now, your upper refers to the leather or material of choice that you use to build the actual shoe part. So for example, the upper of this shoe is the navy blue leather that you can see around the top, and also the pink lining that you can see on the inside there. To make it a little bit confusing, you've got your upper and your lining, but once you connect the two, the whole thing becomes the upper. Now, this brings me to my next component, which is your stiffeners. Now, in my courses, I use these thermoplastic stiffeners because I just find them to be such good quality and they last forever. Now, the alternative to this is using a vegetable tanned leather and molding it using water. But keep in mind, the moment your shoes get wet, these will start to lose their shape. So I find that the thermoplastic stiffeners just last longer and give a better finish. How they work is that they sit in between the upper and the lining and get molded to the shape of the last, so that once you remove your last from the shoe holds its shape. Now, the toe puff is pretty easy to guess. It goes in the toe section, and the counter stiffener goes in the heel section, making sure that your shoe maintains its structure. Now, this brings me to my next component, which is your soles. I like to use this really beautiful leather look resin sole sheeting. I used to use vegetable tanned leather to do all of my soles, but I just find this resin sheeting is so durable. The finish of it looks beautiful on the edges. It's easy to cut out by hand. Yeah, it's just a dream to work with. So I like to use this resin sole sheeting for all my soles. It comes in beige and black. When you're doing a flat shoe like this, you can see that you can actually build up layers of resin sheeting to create a nice heel tip like this. And if you're doing a shoe with a heel like this one, you simply cut the soling to fit the base of the shoe that you want to use. And I just think it comes together really, really beautifully. The final component that goes inside all finished shoes is called the insole sock. Now, the insole sock sits on the inside of the shoe, on top of the insole board, and it covers up any little screws we've put in through our insole board to drill in our heels. It's also a great opportunity to add in some comfort foam. It comes like this also in sheet form and can be layered up to get extra padding. You'll also find an insole sock inside a flat shoe like this, and it's usually just a piece of foam with some leather on top, which goes in there like that and covers up the Texon board that you used for the insole. Now, in terms of the tools you're going to need, it really doesn't need to take up much space at all. So inside this box, I'm going to go through some of the key small hand tools that you'll need to get started making shoes from home. First of all, we've got two different types of glue. We've got a water-based non-toxic glue, which is what I use for 90% of the process. And then we've got a solvent-based glue, which I use to attach the soles and for particularly tricky materials. Now, throughout my footwear masterclass, you might see me using a big tub of glue in place of this one. One of the main reasons I use that tub is because I make a lot of shoes and it's got a brush in the lid, which I love. But I will say that I've found this little tube to actually be a little bit stronger. Now, when it comes to applying these glues, both of them, I use a little plastic spatula because I just find I can get really precise with where I put the glue. And once the glue's dried up a little bit, you can just clean it off the end super easily and reuse it. So I use the same spatula for both of the glues. Next thing you'll need is a silver pen. Now, a silver pen is a bit like the equivalent of a dressmaker's chalk. We use that a lot in footwear, especially when we're working on dark colored leathers so we can see what we're doing. Both the glue and the silver pen are easily removed with a little piece of rubber crepe, which is used to clean up your shoes afterwards and get any glue off the uppers that are in places you don't want it to be. We've got a tape measure, which always comes in handy when we are working out our fitting or to measure our feet when we're doing custom fittings on our lasts. The awl, which is used for both the pattern making process and the shoemaking process. This can really help us put our pieces together with precision. A good quality masking tape is essential when you're making patterns, but also comes in super handy throughout the whole shoemaking process, especially when attaching insole boards to the lasts. The folding hammer is one of my absolute favorite shoemaking tools. Aww. Its main purpose is for folding the top lines of your uppers, but I tend to use it for so much more than that. Whether I'm flattening out creases in my stiffeners, hammering in heel tips, or just trying to create a nice flat surface, I keep that handy with me throughout the whole shoemaking process. The safety beveler is another one of my absolute favorite shoemaking tools and can really help make a drastic difference between having an average looking pair of finished shoes and a really good quality looking pair of finished shoes. Its sole purpose is to skive down the leather or material of choice and to essentially reduce bulk. And if you've ever used a safety beveler before, you know that there is nothing more satisfying than a fresh blade. So it also comes with a packet of fresh blades. Our heavy duty scissors are another amazing tool to keep on hand, especially when trimming down your insole boards and your resin sole sheeting. We've also got a craft knife in there for some more precision cutting. And last but not least, we've also got a little sandpaper file in there. Now, I actually discovered these on a trip to Thailand with my family and couldn't believe that I hadn't seen these in shoemaking sooner. Now, it's got a coarse sandpaper on one side and a finer sandpaper on the other side, which helps us to just get a really nice smooth finish on both our insoles and our soles. But these are just almost impossible to find anywhere, and I actually ended up having them made specifically for this kit, so that will come in a lot more handy than you think it will. So there are a few other things that you'll need to make your own shoes, and they are optional, and you might even know someone that has one of these that you can borrow instead of buying it for yourself. So the first one that I use quite often is the heat gun. The heat gun comes in really handy when speeding up the drying process for the glue and also when attaching our stiffeners, because they are thermoplastic, which means they're heat activated, and we do need to really heat them up quite a lot so that they can become malleable. Then we've got a drill. Now this is only needed if you're going to be making shoes that have a mid or a high heel, because you'll need to drill through the shanked insole board and into the heel in order to attach the heel to the shoe. But remember, this only makes up about 5 minutes of the whole shoemaking process. So if you have someone with a drill that you can borrow, that will be fine. Now the Dremel is a sanding tool, and again, completely optional because you can use your sandpaper file in place of this, but my goodness, does it speed things up. So if you're going to be doing quite a lot of sanding in your particular shoe that you're making, a Dremel will really speed up the process for you whilst giving you a really nice finish. And last but not least, while it only takes up 10% of the whole shoemaking process, you will need a sewing machine. But a domestic sewing machine is absolutely fine. I recommend you use a denim needle rather than a leather needle, as a leather needle can really leave quite a big hole in your material. And I also recommend you steer clear of cotton threads because they can snap. We want to be using a polyester or a nylon thread. Now, when you enroll in my online footwear masterclass, not only do you get lifetime access and ongoing support, but we'll also send you a free shoemaking starter kit to help you get started from home. The kit includes a pair of lasts. Now you get to choose what heel height you want and what size you want. I really recommend that you use our size guide before you select your last, just to make sure that you are getting the closest possible size to your foot. And remember, you can always build up your last to create a custom fit on the lesson within the course. You'll also get a shoemaking component kit with all the components needed to make your first pair of shoes. That includes all those components we talked about earlier. And last but not least, you'll also get a shoemaking toolkit, which includes all of those hand tools that I went through with you earlier. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you how to make this beautiful pair of slide-on mules. They are so easy to make and came together really quickly. You can see that I've used a two-tone in that I've used a suede and a leather just to give the overall design a bit more style. But of course, you can use whatever leather you want, and let's get started. Okay, so before we start covering the insoles, I thought I'd just show you what's actually going to be visible at the end. So we're covering the insole because this edge of it here is going to be visible all the way around the back and at the peep toe section there as well. All right, so we're going to want to trace around our insoles with about 10 millimeters or a centimeter. That is just to wrap it around the edge. I would normally do this with a silver pen or a black pen, but I didn't have one in front of me, so I used a pencil. So we can put those to the side now, and I can go ahead and cut those out. All right, so I've now got in front of me my insoles and my leather for covering the insoles. And this part's easy. I'm just going to coat the underside of the leather, that's important, and the top side of the insoles. All right, once they've had a little bit of time to dry, we can place the insoles onto the leather and then really flatten the leather onto the board. And then once we've done that, we can put about a spatula width strip of glue around the outside edge of the insole so that we can wrap this over and stick it down. And I usually start with the sides first. Now when we get around the heel and the toe section, we'll need to pull in some little pleats. So I just like to pull them as far away from the edge as I can, and then use my thumb to just sort of flatten it out. And then I'm going to do the same thing at the back. Once you're happy with how they are looking, we can go ahead and trim any excess off the base, and then these insoles will be all done. So to do that, I like to use my safety beveler, and you can see I'm literally just shaving those pleats off like that. Okay, once we've got them nice and skived down on the bottoms and looking nice and smooth on the tops, then they are finished insoles and we are ready to move on to the next step. A decision I need to make is whether I want to have the suede on the outside piece or the inside piece. And I think the suede will look nice on the outside piece. So I know this is my outside piece because it doesn't have a notch, and I know this is my inside piece because it does have a notch. So I'm going to keep this piece with that yellow and this piece with that yellow. So let's flip those over. It's really important that I remember to flip this pattern to get a left and a right foot, because otherwise we will be making two left feet. and we'll do the same on our suede pieces. All right, at this point I can go ahead and cut all the pieces out as neatly as possible, and I'm ready to now get started on my linings. Now the lining's quite easy because I'm just gonna trace my pieces as normal. Okay, so we're just gonna add about 5 mil to that top line and to the peep toe as well. And most importantly here, I have flipped the patterns. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and cut those out. So now we need to start stitching these pieces together, which is gonna be incredibly easy because our pattern is so simple. But what I wanted to do is first show you how I like to add a little bit of glue just so that everything stays put while I'm stitching. So I'm just putting literally like 1 millimeter of glue, and I'm just gonna lay one piece over the top of the other and stick the two together like that. And then I'll do the same thing here. Now, if you remember from our pattern, we added in a 5 millimeter seam allowance on both sides, which means that I want to stitch straight down this line 5 millimeters away from the edge. And if I open that up now, I've got a nice discrete seam there. So I'll pop those to the side, and we're gonna do the same thing with our yellow pieces. Okay, we are almost done here. What I'm gonna do next is just basically open out these seams so that they lay nice and flat. And I'm gonna take a spatula, and I'm gonna do a spatula width of glue right over the top of the stitch line. And then this is why we didn't want to add too much glue when we stuck those together, because we actually want to peel it back apart and then fold it back on itself. All right, those pieces are all opened up. We can now go ahead and join our uppers to our linings. And you'll see that our lining should be a little bit bigger all the way around the top and at the peep toe there, because we added in that trimming allowance when we traced those out. So we are going to take our glue and we're going to coat the whole underside of the upper. Now when we're doing the lining, we want glue everywhere except for that trimming allowance. Right, so once we've got those glued up, you are literally going to take your upper and place it over the top of your lining, matching up the seams as best you can. All right, now that is ready to go into the sewing machine, and I'm gonna try and stay as close to the edge as I can. Okay, that has stitched beautifully. I'm really happy with that. So I've just grabbed my scissors and I'm gonna cut away the excess trimming allowance on the peep toes, really nice and close to the edge, but making sure that we're not cutting through our stitching on the other side. Okay, and then with the top section, I am just gonna leave maybe a little tab here and a little tab on the side there. Okay, so there we have our uppers. They are starting to look really good, and I'll see you in the next video. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to take a bit of masking tape and connect the insole to the last. I'm now going to take another couple of little pieces and just attach them onto those little extra tabs that I left. Now the reason for this is that sometimes when we add masking tape to our upper, it can either leave a sticky residue, which isn't very nice, or it can even sometimes take the coating and the color off with it, which we don't want. So try not to get masking tape on your uppers. Okay, at that point I can sort of place it over the top of the last like that. And then I'm just going to kind of wrap it over and place the tape down. What I'm going to do next is flip this over. I'm going to take my glue. This is still our water-based non-toxic glue. And I'm going to glue along the sides here. And then we are going to glue the inside edge of the lining. Okay, so at this stage, I like to start with the toe and just sort of fold it over there like that and place it down. And if you've already done your other one, you can actually line up the two tops and place them together like that and just double check that they are coming in at the same place. I would say this side could actually come down just a fraction. I usually just do one side at a time, so if I pull that out to the edge there and stick it down. I can then place that down, and I'll do the same on this side. And at that point, I can now go ahead and just pull the rest of the layers over and just really flatten that out. And I'm taking the tape off the backs now. I am pretty happy with that. So I'm going to go back to my handy safety beveler, and all I want to do here is skive away all of the excess to get a really nice flat surface for our sole to go on. You can really see the difference there and how flat I've got that surface in comparison to the first one. All right, I will see you in the next video to get those soles on. The soling material I've got is our 2mm thick resin sole sheeting in beige. All right, so I'm gonna trace those out, as always, remembering to flip the pattern from left to right. All right, and then you can go ahead and cut them out. I'm gonna use my heavy duty scissors. Okay, so once you've cut out the soles, I like to just take a little sandpaper file and just smooth the edges a little bit. Just smooth them as much as they need. There is one last thing I like to do, just keeping in mind that the sole is gonna go on like that, and then our heel is gonna go over the top like that. So I like to take a little bit of the weight out of those edges at the back there, but you can just use your safety beveler and just sort of take a chunk out of the corner like that, just so it sort of smooths out, and it'll just sit a little bit nicer under the heel. Our soles are now ready to get glued onto the bottom of our shoes. So I'm gonna coat that sole right up to the very edge. And I like to go all the way around the edge first. And then once I've done the full edge, I'll then fill in the middle afterwards. That is looking really good now. So what I would do at that stage is just let those dry whilst I glue up the other one, and hopefully by the time that one's been glued up, this one should be pretty much ready to stick. Okay, so let's come back to our original that we had glued up. And you might have also noticed that I've got my trusty heat gun here. I'm going to give it a quick blast with the heat gun, both on the sole and the bottom of the shoe, just to really heat up and activate that glue so that it's got a really nice strong hold. Okay, and before I go ahead and stick my sole, I always like to give it a little bend. And I basically want to go around with your thumbs and really seal it in all the way around. Okay, there we have two beautifully attached soles. These are looking so awesome and they're almost finished. So let's go ahead and get our heels covered so that we can get them attached next. All right, so let's get these heels covered. And this is really easy. All I'm gonna do is place it on the leather, and I'm just gonna kind of roll it from side to side to figure out how big my pattern's gonna be. I'll just kind of trace straight along the bottom. I am leaving a little bit of excess at the bottom, which I'm gonna cut out later. But as I'm rolling, I'm just following the edge. And then if I put that down, I'm again just going a little bit further than halfway. So if that goes all the way like that, then we're good. And now we basically want to do the same thing at the top. So at the top, I'm actually giving about 5mm excess because we want to fold it over the edge. So we want to have excess at the top. Okay, so once we've got this shape, we can go ahead and cut it out. I always glue the heels first so they can be drying while I'm gluing the leather. And then on the leather, make sure we're coating it right up to the edge as well. All right, so now we want to take the heel and just place it in the center and sort of roll it around and wrap this over the edge and wrapping that side over the edge as well. So I can lift that one up and I can actually see where the center is because there's a little line there. So I'm just going to place my ruler where the center of the heel is. And I'm going to take my craft knife and just cut straight through the leather. And then I usually just wrap this one over the top, and then you can basically feel where the edge of the other one is, but sometimes I make a little groove, and then you can basically do the same thing. And then we can see that those centers have met really nicely in the middle there. So we're almost done here. What I like to do around the base is cut it straight off. So that is looking really nice at the bottom. I can actually at this point go ahead and just put the heel tip in. So sometimes I just give it a little whack with a hammer. Okay, and then around the top we are almost done. I'm just going to take a touch more glue and paste around the top of the heel. And then we're going to quite simply just fold the top of the leather. And that is a beautifully covered heel. I'm going to do the same thing on the other heel, and then we are ready to drill them in. And I'm going to now take my shoes off the last. So I'll remove the tape on those little extra bits of trimming allowance, and then the fun part, we're just going to wiggle the last out and pop them to the side. So I'm placing the heel right at the very back. One thing to remember is that our insole board has got a metal shank straight through the middle there. So I want to put my screws on either side of the metal shank, so probably around about here and around about here, if we imagine that our shank is sitting about there. So this is really easy. I'm just going to take my drill and go straight through the insole board. I will feel a little pop when it goes through the insole board. At that point, I want to keep going so that I do make a mark on the heel. Pop, straight through. And then continue drilling to bring it back up. Okay. All right, so I'm now going to screw those all the way in really nice and flat. So that's gone in super easy. I'm going to do the same thing on the other one, and then we are almost finished. We can move on to our insole socks. You could just do a plain insole sock, but since this is quite a plain shoe, I'm going to do a slightly fancier insole sock using this pattern, which you can get off the ICANMAKESHOES website. And it's got two parts to it. I'm going to do the back part out of the yellow leather, and I'm going to do the main part out of the yellow suede. So I've cut out my pattern and I can go ahead and trace them onto the leather. Remember to flip the pattern or you will be making two left feet. Because we've got a 5mm underlay on the allowance here, it means that the top piece will just sit on top of this piece, and I'll just show you what I mean. So I'm just putting the tiniest little bit of glue right on the edge there. And as usual, this is just really to hold it in place while we stitch, so it really doesn't need to be the strongest hold. And then to be honest, we can probably just put these straight on while the glue is still wet. All right, we are ready now to jump on the sewing machine. I want to stitch as close as I can to the edge and as neatly as I can. So let's see how I do. I'm now going to add some foam to the base for extra comfort. All right, and I'm just going to put a bit of scrap paper here, and I'm going to use my water-based glue to just coat the backs of the foam with glue. And then I'm also going to coat the back of the insole socks that I made with glue as well. Okay, and then we just simply place the foam in the center, and then we want to fill in the glue on this side of the foam as well. All right, now while that is drying, we will come back over to our shoes, and we can actually trim off this excess little tabs now. We want to then take our insole sock pattern and just put a little mark where that's going to sit so that we know where we should put our glue, and fill it in all the way up to the silver pen line. All we're going to do next is take our insole socks, place them inside the shoe, and kind of line them up where we want them to be sitting at the back. That has gone in beautifully. Okay, and there we have the finished two-tone yellow mules. I am absolutely obsessed with these. I love how they turned out, and there's only one thing left to do, and that is to try them on. I hope you enjoyed that lesson, and if you'd like to further your shoemaking experience and join our footwear masterclass, you can choose from one of the enrollment packages down below.